There is an angle of experience where the dark is distilled into light. This is a quotation by Christopher Fry from his discussion of tragedy and comedy. In the classical sense, tragedy is considered a slice of life, not the wholeness of it. And comedy is considered the wholeness of life, that angle of perceiving life from which we can experience both the sorrow and the joy, and ultimately experience then what is called the divine comedy of life. Certainly the greatest tragedy of life is death, the death of someone we love. That has always been true. When we are in that experience, that darkness of experiencing the death of someone we love, it feels as though we're totally absorbed by it, that there's nothing else but that. But there are ways that the soul or the psyche has of giving us clues of how to shift our perception, shift so that the angle is different and we can let in the light. We can begin to see the wholeness, and that is what helps us to move through the process. And I'll give you an example of that. When my son was dying, well, we weren't sure he was dying. He was on a medicine that would completely calm the brain, allow the machines to work until a certain day. I think it was maybe 6 or 7 days. And then we would see if there was any movement, any signs of life coming from him. The night before the day that we would know this, my husband and my son's girlfriend and I, we were very much looking forward to that day. We just didn't really know what to expect. It seemed to us that it could go either way. And just before I woke up, I had a very powerful dream. I felt spirits, I saw spirits coming to me very quickly, just one after the other. And they were saying, "Are you ready? Are you ready? It's a miracle, a miracle." And in my dream, I said, I am ready. And when I woke up, I was just amazed because I didn't know whether that would mean that our son Pishti would live and that would be the miracle, or that he would die. But I couldn't perceive death as a miracle. But on the way to the hospital, I told my husband and Chene about the dream, and I said, I don't think that we can assume that this is telling us that he's going to live, but maybe it is. But the dream comes from that deeper level of consciousness that always holds the vision of the wholeness of life. So its perception is different from what we have right now. Well, when we went to the hospital, there was absolutely no sign of life from him, and we knew then that he would probably die. After I wrote the book about our experiences during that time, I didn't have a title. And I sat down on the floor one afternoon and I told Kim, who was my editor and who's director of the Kovacs Center, I said, I've just got to let this book tell me what the title is. Well, in the first chapter, I tell about this dream. And as I was reading it, I thought, of course, this is what it's about. It's about the miracle of death. And while I understood that literally at the time of the dream, it took me a long time to really be able to shift my consciousness, shift the angle of experience to such a place that I could really understand and experience that death is a miracle, that it is as much a miracle as birth, because what we call birth is the coming into time and space, into matter of the soul. And of course what we call death is the return of the soul into another world, the subtle world, the spirit world. And what my soul was trying to do was to help me to distill this darkness, this slice of life, this tragedy of the death of our son, to see it in a much greater perspective. And we do have those guides, you might say, along the way that help us to know how to distill that darkness. It did take me a long time to really experience it. so that I could really say that we had walked through the tragedy, and it didn't mean that I no longer had sorrow for his death, because I did. But there were times when I began to laugh, and I actually thought it was strange that I was able to laugh with a kind of joy, and gradually I began to realize that I could hold the sorrow in one part of me, and at the same time I could experience the joy, and that I realized, oh, that's what the Divine Comedy is. It's both the sorrow and the joy, that by walking through the tragic experience, my soul had led me into an angle of experience where that darkness really had been distilled into light. That didn't mean that the darkness wasn't there, but it was totally different experience. It was the dark and the light, and that is what made up the wholeness of life. And as my son had said in a vision that my husband had with him, there is nothing but life. Birth and death are experiences in time and space. There is nothing but life. And that is the Divine Comedy.